So Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, he should know better than this. But then again, I think it's just another piece of scum in the swamp. A guy who has no human morals whatsoever. Every single year, millions of Americans overdraft their bank accounts. It's not uncommon. They pay a lot of money in overdraft fees, right? So, under the previous administration, as bad as they were, they did at least try to balance it a little bit. And they enacted a law that kept overdraft fees at $5. Now, I don't know how many banks and credit unions were actually following this letter of the law. Probably not many. I haven't had an overdraft fee in quite some time, but luckily, I know millions of Americans do. Did you get charged $5 or did they charge you just their typical $20 to $25 for an overdraft fee? That's a question in and of itself. But I think I want to go a little bit deeper because the Senate just passed a bill that did away with that bill, did away with that law. And it moved on to the House. And there was at least one Republican Josh Hawley from Missouri, who said that this bill by Tim Scott made absolutely no sense. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But then again, it makes perfect sense if you understand how Washington and how lawmaking really works. So the Senate yesterday, the U.S. Senate in Washington, voted in favor of this bill authored by Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina. They voted 52 to 48 in favor of the resolution that came from the Senate Banking Committee. Now, go figure. This is a bunch of senators who are for the banks, right? For the big banks. They voted to repeal the ruling from the Biden administration. Now, Scott, he had the guts, the gall, I guess that's what you call it. He had the guts to actually say that removing this cap for consumers would be good for them. And he argued this on the floor of the Senate. Well, Tim, I got a question for you. Which group of banks, which banking lobby wrote this stupid bill and gave it to you and told you to put your name on it? I just want to know. And I think it's only fair for the American people to know that that's really how bills get introduced, right? You see, a lobby group or somebody like this can write a bill. They can go and find them a weak senator or a weak congressman or whoever they think is favorable to them. And they can say, here, for example, Tim Scott, we think you're a weakling. We think you're a puppet. You're good for us, buddy. You're good for us. Here's a bill. See that it gets through, all right? And he can push it through. You see, congressmen don't listen to people. They listen to lobbyists. Now, you can write a bill yourself, and you can take it to your congressman, and you can take it to your senator, you can take it to your state lawmaker, and give it to them and say, hey, I think this is a good idea. They're going to research it probably, and they're going to research the hell out of it, and then they're going to say, you know what? I'm going to introduce this bill. I may make some changes. I may not. You can introduce a bill on your behalf, people's behalf, right? Well, in this case, the banking lobby went and found them Republican Tim Scott. Yeah, good old boy. He'd do anything, man, to be liked and to be loved by people with power. This guy's a gutless wonder. He's a Republican version of a gutless Democrat. Okay? It's that simple. Tim Scott would do anything to benefit Tim Scott, not the people. He just wants to benefit Tim Scott and the people that got him elected. And bills like this are completely obvious. Just like people like AOC give the Democrat Party a bad name, these Republicans like Tim Scott give Republicans a bad name. Because this only goes to solidify how corrupt the Republican Party really is. And Tim Scott is an enemy of the American people. I'm just going to say that right here. He's an enemy of the American people. Where the Democrat Party, they're an enemy of true traditional liberal values. The Republican Party are truly becoming an enemy of the people and a puppet of the corporations and a puppet of the idiots that put them in power, corporations. I'll tell you, the Republican Party is just as corrupt as the Democrat Party. They're all pretty shitty. That's the only way to put it. I'm not going to tell you anything here that hasn't already been said, but repealing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's overdraft fee limitations, this is going to hurt working class people who occasionally overdraw their account by, $1 or whatever, right? Okay. I get it. They want to make sure that people get the message that you shouldn't be overdrafting your account and spending money that you don't have. I get it. But as Americans continue to struggle under Republican rule that they said they would fix, and they've said that they now can't really fix it, and they point the blame everywhere else, that's what politicians do, right? As Americans continue to struggle with high prices and inflation, this bill is completely stupid because it only protects the banks. Now, do you remember that Donald Trump, he campaigned on capping credit card interest rates, right? Okay. They also endorsed Tim Scott, a friend of the bankers, a fob, a puppet, a little whipping boy. I'll say it. He's a puppet. He's a useless piece of garbage. That's what he is. Now, unfortunately, sitting here calling him names and calling him out like this doesn't bother him, because you can't bother a politician, because politicians don't have a conscience. It's just that simple. Now, people like Elon Musk or, who are calling to get rid of the CFRB, they're thinking this is a good idea. They're thinking that somehow this is a step towards removing these agencies that actually protect people, that actually level the playing field for people. Well, you know what? Elon Musk said that the Financial Protection Board, right, did zero good. Well, did they? Did they? They were protecting consumers. Protecting consumers against people like Uncle Tim Scott. That's what they were doing. They were protecting us against the banks and protecting us against the rich and the powerful. Well, I guess you want to remove that? Now, granted, the CFB, right, had a lot of complaints, 6.7 million complaints in the past few years. That's a lot of complaints. And I will get it that Americans probably need an overhaul in this system. But what were those complaints about? A majority of those complaints were about Americans not getting what they felt they deserved, the protections that they felt that they deserved. Well, if you do away with this, there's fewer protections. There's nobody to protect you. You see, that's where this Republican agenda just doesn't work. These systems don't need to be removed. They need to be overhauled. They need to be made fair. Some of these systems do occasionally work. Kind of like senators, Tim Scott. Occasionally, they work for the people. I guess the CEOs and the bank presidents and stuff who lobbied their lobby to get you to file this bill. I guess they're people too, I guess, right? In your eyes, I guess. But the truth is, the Republican Party is doing for the American people about as much as the Democrat Party did. Not much. So this bill is now headed to the House, it's headed over to the dormitory known as Congress, right? Okay, the House of Representatives, the useless little flakes that all they do is bicker and argue amongst each other. People like, this Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC and a bunch of whack jobs that just mouth off to mouth off. They're just a bunch of no good scum. And I get that. And I think you get that too. So here's the question. What do we do? What do we do about this worthless, no good scum in Washington? This swamp that we were going to drain ends up just being another useless swamp. So what do? Where do we go? We've got to figure out how to get rid of this dead weight, how to get rid of all this floating wood, how to get rid of these people like Uncle Tim, how to get rid of these sellouts in Washington. How do we do that? That's the question that you and I need to ask ourselves. Not Democrat, not Republican. We need to ask ourselves, how do we get rid of the scum in Washington? The Joe Bidens, the Donald Trumps, the Chuck Schumers, the AOCs, the Marjorie Taylor Greens. How do we get rid of this human waste, this feces that's in Washington from both parties? How do we get rid of this trash? You and I need to ask ourselves that fundamental question. Congress, the president, previous presidents, they're all garbage because they don't work for we, the people, you and I. Me and you. So where does it stop? Nobody knows. But I think if we find us some congressmen who have morals, who have ethics, who haven't been sold out to the establishment parties, to the banks, to the lobbyists, to these people who write these bills and just tell these congressmen to attach their name to it with a check, or a bonus, or a reward, or whatever. We have to figure out how these things work. And that's on you and me. And the only way we're going to do that is to get rid of our parties. Get rid of our loyalties, just like the Democrats did. Get rid of their loyalties to a party. That's what we're going to have to do. And that's going to take a lot of crow. If you get my pun. And it really wasn't a pun. We're going to have to eat a lot of crow. Because the truth is, the system has failed us. And it's time for a serious overhaul. And Trump, Biden, none of them are willing to do that for us. To overhaul the system and put the cards back in the hands of you and I. We, the people, you and me. Simple as that.